In reading today, we're going to continue using knowledge about context clues to help us as we learn about the settlers in our new country. Today, our skill will be apply background knowledge and use surrounding words to determine the meaning of an unknown word or phrase. Today, as we use this skill, we will look at a text and we will try to figure out the meaning of an unknown word. We can use our background knowledge, we can use pictures, or we can use other words that surround it to help us determine the meaning. We have looked at this notes page before third grade. There are lots of different kinds of context clues. Some of the ones we've seen the most is when the text defines it for us. They give us a word and then they tell us what it means. We've also seen a lot of synonym clues where they tell us a word, then they give us a word that means about the same thing. Then we can determine what that unknown word probably means. As we continue to study context clues, we're going to think more about what happened in our country after the 13 colonies were established. We have read about how there were 13 colonies on the east coast of our country. Well, after some time, people in the U.S. started to move towards the west. Today, we're going to watch a quick video to talk about how this happened, and we're going to read a text that will talk about the Northwest Territory of our country.
In 1783, when the United States and Great Britain signed the Treaty of Paris, officially ending the War of Independence, these were the boundaries of the new nation: the Atlantic Ocean on the east, the Mississippi River on the west, Canada on the north, and Spanish Florida on the south. As we can see, that included much more than just the original 13 colonies. It included territory known as the Western Lands. Great Britain had won this land from France at the end of the French and Indian War. In 1763, when the war ended, France lost all of its territory in North America. Great Britain acquired French Canada, as well as the rich lands of the Ohio River Valley. American colonists moved right in. Native Americans living on the land attacked the settlers, and the British sent in troops to protect them. This was very costly. So, the British issued the Proclamation of 1763, stating that there could be no settlements west of the Appalachian Mountains. The colonists were furious. Things got worse when the British imposed new taxes on the colonists to pay for the soldiers that they had to send to the Western lands. All of this led directly to the Declaration of Independence. So, when America won the Revolution, it also won all the British lands south of Canada and east of the Mississippi. The new United States now had to decide what to do with this land.
After colonists started moving west into the Northwest Territory, they had to decide what to do with the land. Today we're going to read about what happened when people in the U.S. started moving west. Our text is called Expanding West. In 1783, the British and the Americans signed a second treaty of Paris. It recognized the United States of America as a new country. The treaty gave most British land south of the Great Lakes and east of the Mississippi River to the United States. The British still held some forts in North America, and Spain claimed lands west of the Mississippi River. A new territory. Because of the high cost of fighting the American Revolution, the United States had many debts. A debt is something owed, often money. Many American soldiers had not been paid. France was also owed money. Congress decided to use lands west of the Appalachians to help pay debts. At first, several states claimed these lands. In time, the states turned them over to the United States government. The area north of the Ohio River became known as the Northwest Territory. A territory is an area owned and governed by a country. It includes lands that are now the states of Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. Congress planned to sell lands in the territory to raise money. Some soldiers would also be paid with the land. George Rogers Clark and his soldiers received land on the Ohio River, and there they founded the town of Clarksville. Today we're going to use this text to determine the meaning of unknown words in the text. You will write the meaning. You will say what clues helped you as we learn more about the Northwest Territory. Okay, third grade, we are going to go into a breakout room. In your breakout room, you're going to talk with your group about what you understand from the video and the text. We have been learning all about the colonies that were built by the colonists.
I can't find him somewhere.
Today we're going to talk about it with our partner in a breakout room. You may join me on Seesaw. Click Activities, Assign to Class folder, Red ELA. Our task today is called Context Clues, Settling the Northwest Territory. Go ahead and open up your task and be ready. Slide 1 talks about our success criteria. We know that we are focusing on using context clues to help us determine the meaning of a word we may not know. Right now, we are reading about history of our community. We are learning about what happened when the settlers moved to this country. They settled here. They started establishing the colonies. And then today, our video talked about, well, what happened after there were 13 colonies? We just learned that the people started to move west. They started to get even more land. Today, we're going to learn about that land. We're going to learn about what happened when the people started moving west to get more and more land for our country. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to read slides 2 and slides 3. These are our texts for today. It's called Settling the Northwest Territory. Your first job is going to be reading the text to yourself. You need to read pages 2 and 3. I'm going to put you into a breakout room by yourself, just like we would read by ourselves in class. You're going to go into a breakout room by yourself and read pages 2 and 3, which is our text today. So what we're figuring out is after the colonies were made, after the settlers and the colonists built the colonies, they started looking for more land. They started gathering more land for our country. As Ashley is sharing out, they started dividing the land into sections. Some of these sections were called townships. Thank you for sharing, Ashley. Who else remembers something very important from our text today on slide 2? What are we learning about today? What do we all need to know? Angela, go ahead. We can't hear you, Angela.
So, it, I know we have no right sending the northwest
Territory, right? Yes, thank you for sharing, Angela. Our text, one of the main ideas of our text is all about this territory. I'm circling it here on our map. They called it the Northwest Territory. After the 13 colonies were built, they started moving west and getting more land for our country. Landon, I see you're ready to share. What do we need to know about our text today?
What is the word called with the O again? The ORD.
The ordinance?
The ordinance is a law.
Okay, so remember we talked about when the founders, when the colonists started building their community called the colonies? We talked about them building laws, right? They had to come up with the rules. So Landon is sharing out that they started coming up with laws. This one was called an ordinance. Thank you, Landon, for mentioning that. That's super important. Are there any other ideas from slide 2 about our text today that's really important that we all need to know? Okay, I think we covered it. I think slide 2 was all about understanding that the settlers started moving west and they started to get more land, and we called it the Northwest Territory. This picture on slide 2 is really important. It helps you see what part of our country was in the Northwest Territory. Ashley, you had one more thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. It says a right is a freedom that belongs to a person. Congress appointed former general and author who fought in the American Revolution, governor of the Northwest Territory.
Thanks for sharing that, Ashley. You right now are mentioning how the colonists had to establish the rules. When they started living here in their own country, they had to think, well, what does every person deserve? What are everybody's rights? That's a word that we've talked about with social justice. A right is something that belongs to a person, a freedom that everybody should have. So when they started moving west and getting more land, they had to have these talks. They had to talk about, well, who's in charge? And what rights do we have? And who gets this land and who gets that land? They had to have conversations and come up with rules and laws, like Landon mentioned. They had to figure that out. That was part of them establishing our community. The founders had a really hard job. They had to figure out how to do all of this when they got here and there was nothing. Okay, thanks for sharing. Let's go ahead and look at slide 3. Slide 3 is also our text today. I just split them up so there wasn't so many words on one page. Who has something important from slide 3 that we all need to know? What do you know about our text on slide 3? Nick, go ahead.
Gave up a lot.
There were battles and wars. There were fighting. We heard on text 3 that very early on, when the settlers moved to these new lands, guess who they found? Native Americans. We know all about Native Americans. We know Native Americans were here first. So when the settlers started moving west, when they started coming into this land, they started meeting more Native Americans. Sometimes that created problems. We saw on page 3 that there were battles. It talks about how the Native Americans won some battles, but then we learn more and we see that the settlers, the colonists, started winning more and more battles. What happened when the colonists started winning battles? What did we see in our text today? What happened when the settlers and the colonists started winning the battles? Who can remember from our text? What happened to the Native Americans? Ashley, do you have an answer to this question?
Yeah. Yeah. It says that on August 20, 1794, Blue Jackets were and General Wayne's forces met at Battle of Fallen Timbers. The Native Americans were defeated. After the Battle of Fallen Timbers, the Native Americans signed the Treaty of Greenville. By this treaty, they gave up most of the land in northwest territory.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley, for sharing. So what Ashley just shared, what I see in the text is that when the settlers moved west, boys and girls, they met the Native Americans and they had battles. And our text tells us that the settlers and colonists started winning the battles. That means the Native Americans were defeated. They were losing. So right here it says after a battle, the Native Americans signed a treaty. A treaty is like a paper that you can sign to say, okay, we will be done fighting. By this treaty, when they signed that paper, they gave up their land in the Northwest Territory. So let's go back to our map. I know that Native Americans were living here in these lands. They were living here. And then the colonists moved west and they started having battles. When the Native Americans lost the battles, they signed the Treaty of Greenville and they gave up their land in the Northwest Territory. That is how our country got this section of land. I want you thinking about that today. I want you thinking about what happened when the colonists moved west and they needed more land. That was a good thing for the colonists, but that was kind of a bad thing for the Native Americans who had to lose and give away their land. So when we make choices, boys and girls, it affects us. It affects other people. So we are learning about how our country, our community was established. There were brave people who came over here on ships. There were brave people who were the founders. They started working hard to build homes and jobs and laws. But it also had some bad effects. There were some bad things that happened, especially for the Native American tribes. I see Landon has his hand raised. Go ahead, Landon.
Can I go to the restroom?
We're almost done with our lesson, Landon, then you can go. All right, boys and girls, let's talk about what your task is today using context clues. We have read and discussed pages 2 and 3. That is your text today. Your task, your job starts on slide 4. Will you please click on slide 4 with me? On slide 4, you see 2 words from our text today. The first is township, the second is territory. These 2 words came from our text. I see the word township. I see the words territory. You are going to use your context clues to tell me what these words mean. And how do you know? What clues helped you with the word? You will do that for township and territory. Then on slide 5, you have 2 more words that come from the text on slide 3. The words are ordered and treaty. I see these words on slide 3. So you can go back and look for the purple word. Go back to your text to find the purple word. When you are on the red word, go back to your text and look for the red word to help you. Same thing on slide 5. When you're on ordered, it's underlined in green. Go back to the text and look for green. Lastly is treaty. It's underlined in orange. Go back to your text and look for orange words to help you. When you are done using your context clues for those 4 words, you get to choose a word. You get to choose a word that you don't know. Tell me what the word is by typing it here. Tell me what that word probably means. And tell me what clues helped you in the text. So your job is to complete slides 4 and 5. And then here's an opinion question on slide 6. It says, give your opinion. Was it right for the colonists to move west into the Northwest Territory? There is not a right answer to this, boys and girls. It's your opinion. So your job today is to do slides 4, 5, and give your opinion on slide 6. When you're done, you will reflect on your success with today's skill.